Augusto Roa Bastos. The excavation. A ceaseless fight for freedom and life. War, casualties, tunnels, victims and murderers, plots and a frustrated freedom. The excavation is one of the most representative stories by the Paraguayan Cervantes Prize winner. By Fernando Schell. The story chosen for a literary analysis was written by Paraguayan writer Augusto Roa Bastos, Asunción, Paraguay, June 13, 1917, idem, April 26, 2005. It is a short story called La Excavación, The Excavation, a story that belongs to the book El Trueno entre las Hojas, Thunder Among the Leaves, published by Editorial Losada in 1953. Thunder Among the Leaves is one of the most important books by Augusto Roa Bastos, for it was the first book that granted him international recognition. The Excavation is the fifth story among other 17 stories in this short story collection. These stories are about politics, cultural, racial and linguistic clash in Paraguay, and the struggle for survival. Thunder Among Leaves is a book fed by the Paraguayan oral folkloric literature. This book is full of suffering characters which dignity has been taken away. They are men who were violated, who live in the midst of misery and oppression. In this work, Roa Bastos frequently relies on the grotesque element as a descriptive resource, highlighting misery and injustice. In most stories, the excavation is an exception. A natural community is disturbed by the arrival of civilization. In this situation, the primitive community has no choice but to fight against violence, degradation, and slavery that comes with the triumph of civilization. The different struggles that are seen throughout the work will be marked by the unfortunate character's unending optimism. In the excavation, a prisoner named Parucho Rodi, who lives with almost 100 other prisoners in a cell, finds out that he is living miserably, like a living dead. The story, which refers to Paraguayan internal wars as well as the Chaco War, shows how precarious the Paraguayan jails are, and his main plot is Parucho Rodi's agonic struggle for freedom and a true life. The narrator's omniscient voice sets the structure of the story. The narration begins in present tense, but then there are two retrospective stories, one about the life of the prisoners in the cell 4, and another about a military operation carried out by the protagonist in the Chaco War. A sneak peek to the plot. A former Chaco War soldier, whose name is Parucho Rodi, is locked in the overcrowded cell 4, Valley I, a place which, in a normal situation, would only host 8 prisoners. All of these are political prisoners that have been there for 6 months after the end of a civil war. In the beginning, there were 89 prisoners, but 17 have already died, 9 of them because of several diseases, 4 died because of the inflicted tortures, 2 because of phthisis and other 2 committed suicide. The inhuman situation the prisoners suffer and their longing for freedom leads them to organize a jailbreak, excavating a tunnel that allows them to escape the prison. The prisoners take their turns every 4 hours every day, 6 men advance 50 centimeters to freedom. Parucho Rodi, the protagonist prisoner, was an engineering student, and also had the experience of having excavated a tunnel during the Chaco War. Now, using only an edge-sharpened dish, excavates a tunnel that, according to his calculations, would lead them from the cell 4, Valley I, to the ravine of the Paraguay River. The confinement, diseases, tortures and suicides told in this story are absolutely tragic and horrifying. Cell 4, Valley I, is a place where men barely survive, sustained only by their hope that someday they will be free again. In the story, there have passed 4 months of asphyxia and hard work, and there are only 5 meters left to finish the tunnel, about 25 days of work. Roa's story begins with an earth detachment for which he does not care at the beginning. But immediately after, there is a second earth detachment that buries the lower limbs of the digger. As readers, with the description given of the situation, we notice that Rodi is definitely stuck and he will be unable to do anything about it. There is no way he neither comes back to the cell nor gets to the ravine, because the distance is still too long. The narrator, using a free indirect style, begins to show Rodi's thoughts, who still cannot understand clearly what just happened to him. His deep desire for getting to freedom leads him to confusion as well as to excessive hope. As the asphyxiation progresses, the digger begins to remember his time as a soldier in the Chaco War. There is a flashback inside Rodi's mind. It looks as if the tunnel he is digging can only lead him to his memories, where he casually finds another tunnel. In the Chaco War, which confronted Paraguayans against Bolivians, in the battlefront of Gondra, the enemy trenches were just 50 meters away. Parucho Rodi, along with 14 men, dug an 80 meters tunnel during 18 days, from the Paraguayan trench to the posterior part of the Bolivian rearguard. Thanks to this, Parucho Rodi won the battle, and thanks to this stratagem, the Paraguayan army took their enemy by surprise. Rodi's memories then become a hallucination, a delirium, and the story tends to circularity. Parucho Rodi interprets that the 89 murdered people in the night of Gondra are the same 89 prisoners in the cell 4, Valii. The faces of the people in the Chaco War are now the faces of his cellmates, and that Bolivian soldier whom he shot to death looked so much like himself that he could have been his own twin. Parucho Rodi dies by asphyxia. The tunnel does not get him to freedom, neither to his cellmates. It will even become an excuse and cover-up for the prison guards to kill the remaining prisoners. When the guards find out the tunnel of the cell 4, Valii, get a macabre idea. The night after they discover the tunnel, the prisoners see that the door of their cell is unlocked. Despite the unexplainable situation, they do not suspect a possible ambush. They go out, find everything desert, they cross a back door that leads to an alley, and they fall right into the trap. They are eliminated in a few seconds by machine gun fire. It is a similar death to that suffered by the Bolivians of the front of Gondra at the hands of Rodi and other Paraguayan soldiers. The prison guards were able to distort the truth for the public. They had a satisfying explanation of the facts and were able to use the truth in order to lie. There was the tunnel that nobody wanted to look and made the guards' version of a jailbreak believable. The short story's end shows the invariability of the situation in jails, as the tunnel was blocked and later the cell 4 got overcrowded again, which shows the beginning of another horrifying cycle. A small reflection. This is a short story that we can call a typical ROA Bastos. There is an implicit social protest, the complaint for the living conditions of the underprivileged, the defense of human rights and the fight against injustice. We can also see something I said in the beginning of this article, the hope of the unfortunate character amidst a totally adverse situation. The hope can be seen in the prisoner's decision to dig a tunnel, but it can also be seen in the agonizing Rodi's thoughts. These are thoughts that are not exempt of guilt because, prior to his death, Rodi remembers the killings and deaths in the Chaco War, which torments him. ROA's genius touch can be seen in that game he establishes between the past and the present in Parucho Rodi's mind. This prisoner, who is the protagonist of the story, lives a deplorable situation and is also a victim of abuses and injustice, is a former killer of 89 Bolivians, whom he murdered in their sleep. Seen that way, he is also a traitor to the human fraternity and it makes him feel guilty. That is why the 89 faces of the Bolivians become the faces of the 89 prisoners in the present, including Parucho Rodi himself, who also sees his own face in the enemy he shot with his machine gun in that unforgettable night at Gondra's battlefront.